These are the best and worst legends in Apex Season 21. Now, it could just be me, but I feel like the legend meta is very, very balanced. It doesn't feel like there are legends that are currently useless, nor does it feel like there are several legends that are just really, really OP. But with that said, let's get right into this list. So for this season, I don't think I'm going to have a D tier. I'm going to start the list off in C tier. First up is Gibraltar. And while there are some moments within a game where Gibraltar can feel really strong, I would just describe him as being a good legend, but not great. His upgrades are okay, but they're not the best, and particularly his level 2 upgrades, they're kind of underwhelming. Part of this is because Newcastle got buffed, so he does feel a little bit stronger than Gibby. And this isn't to say that Gibby's like the weakest legend in the game, because I don't believe that. But yeah, I think he's just C tier for now. The next legend in C tier is Valkyrie. And right now, Valk has a bug where her fuel tank on her passive does not regenerate at all throughout the match, so you get like a one-time use on it. Now, of course, this is a bug, and I'm sure they'll fix it at some point, but this isn't the first time Valk has had a bug that honestly lasts for a pretty long time. However, she's a decent legend, and just like Gibby, she's good but not great. There are other legends that I just find are better when it comes to the skirmisher class. Her ultimate feels pretty outdated due to how common evac towers are, and if her passive isn't going to work well, then you don't really have a lot going for you. However, Val can be pretty friendly to newer players. She doesn't have an insane learning curve, so I could definitely see players who are returning to the game or maybe just picking it up for the first time, trying out Valk and having a pretty good time because she does offer a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Third in C tier is Vantage. Now, Vantage's upgrades are very disappointing in my opinion. I wish they would have been slightly buffed this season because I think this would have moved her up into B tier, but I think she's the weakest recon legend despite her sniper being very strong at times. Her tactical is okay, but once again, I just don't think it's that great. I think she can be pretty annoying to fight, especially with that sniper out. But there are a lot of counters to her sniper because as soon as you see this orange beam and you're not in the wide open, you can just cut the line of sight and basically render her ultimate useless. So she's okay, but you know, she needs some buffs for sure. Third in C tier is Watson, and I know the Watsons will be mad at me this season. I had her higher up last season, but here's a huge reason why I've put her in C tier instead of B tier. It's because of Alter. Alter is a huge counter to a lot of these controller legends, and when you use Alter's tactical, you can actually just bypass a Watson fence. You can see it, and because you're in that phase, you'll be able to get out of it and not ever get stunned by it or take any damage. Not to mention, I think her level 2 upgrades could use some tweaking. The dropping of the arc stars doesn't seem that strong, and having her revive allies to 50 HP also is just kind of like, does this really fit Watson? And I don't really think it does. So I'd love to see some better upgrades for Watson, especially when one of the newer legends just straight up can counter her pretty easily. Once again though, Watson is still strong in niche moments of the game, holding down certain areas as long as an Alter can't get in and screw that up. And obviously with her ultimate, blocking any incoming ordinances can be huge, especially in late game scenarios. Lastly, in C tier, I've got Ballistic. Now they tried to buff Ballistic this season with a couple different buffs. One on his level 2 upgrade. They made it so that his sling weapon will upgrade every time his armor upgrades. So that is okay, but I don't think a lot of players are using his sling weapon like that. They're usually using it in his ultimate. I know there will be some players who come and say, I like to use it throughout the game, this and that, but it's not the broad majority for sure. Beyond that, his tactical did get slightly buffed. If a player walks into the tactical that's on the ground or anywhere in the world, it will deal 10 damage as opposed to 5. It's nothing major here. There's just a lot of interactions where his tactical doesn't hit when I feel like it should hit, especially when you get the lock on. He's fun to play, don't get me wrong. I played a lot of Ballistic, but he's still just not that strong. He needs a couple more buffs in my opinion. Moving on to B tier, and we've got quite a few in this tier, but I just want to say every legend within the tier is basically equal, so I'm not saying like B minus, B plus, none of that. It's just B tier. Starting off is Ashe. Now Ashe did receive a small buff, but a meaningful one at that, and that is that she can use her tactical offhand now, meaning she can use it while shooting or having her gun out or also healing. And this is definitely a necessary change. I'm not sure why it took so long to be implemented because it doesn't make her OP, but you know, you get her level 3 upgrade having 2 of those snares, you know, it's pretty good. She's still a little outclassed by this new legend in my opinion, but she's definitely much better now that she has a better tactical. I had fun while playing her, but I don't think she'll be in the meta necessarily. So B tier for now. Second in B tier is going to be Catalyst. Catalyst did receive some pretty big changes. They reverted the nerf to her tactical from a couple seasons ago, so now she can just throw it further, basically how she could when she first came out. They changed her level 2 upgrades around so that now you can choose between having 3 spikes or increasing her ultimate length by 15 meters. And then on her level 3 upgrade, they have created a new one called Pharaoh Door, which fully rebuilds and reinforces missing doors with her passive. So in the past, she would create this black web of whatever and create a door out of that, but now she can just rebuild a door straight up and then reinforce it. Or you can get an increase in her ultimate lifetime by 5 seconds. That is very situational. 5 seconds doesn't feel like a lot, especially when it's being used, but I know it can help with rotations. So while she can also be countered by Alter, and I know a lot of people are going to bring that up because I brought that up about Watson, I feel like with Catalyst, there's a little bit more outplay here, and she's still a dynamic legend because of her ability to hold down an area, but also use her ultimate for rotations, and just creating some sort of fog of war when it comes to fighting in line of sight. Next in B tier is Crypto, and now Crypto received some major buffs and changes, and I gotta say, he's much, much better. You could even make an argument to put him in A tier. I am not, however. To quickly go over some of these changes, the Neuralink traffic upgrade is now just integrated into his base kit. Every time Crypto throws his drone out, he will verbally call out how many squads are within that 200-meter range. This is super helpful in just about every mode, whether it's ranked, trios, or even the solos. The squad count banners are also visible anytime the drone is in that deployed state. So even if you missed what Crypto said, you can just look to the banner. His level 2 upgrades also receive some changes. The passive and ult range is increased by 25%, or you can have improved drone handling. And on his level 3, you can double the drone recharge rate and gain a speed boost when it explodes. Or you can get a drone scan that persists for 1.5 seconds. The thing I like about these upgrades is that it not only plays into Crypto in the drone, it also plays into Crypto's kit while he's not in the drone. And so I think this is a good way to start moving Crypto into that recon class so that he's not completely handicapped by getting into the drone. And at times, you guys know in combat, it's just not feasible to do all of that. So I think this is a good way to start working Crypto in the right direction. B tier for now. Next is going to be Fuse. I put Fuse in C tier last season. A lot of players were upset about that. Look, I mean, Fuse is fun. He has some strong components, but he's not the best. Now, they did change his upgrades. He can scan ring consoles now on his level 2, which is, I don't know. I mean, in ranked, I guess that's helpful, but in pubs and stuff, it's rather meaningless. Next, on Scar Tissue, he'll take 20 damage and ignore slowing effects from the Mother Load. This is basically a simplified version of Scar Tissue, but it is actually a buff to it, because previously he was taking 37 damage over time. And then Reckless, which is taking the 50% less explosive damage. This also got changed so that it applied to continuous knuckle cluster hits. And so if Fuse is going to sit into a full knuckle cluster with this perk on, he's only going to take 32 damage. Now, all of this is still a good amount of damage, right? 30 plus damage within a fight. I mean, that can be everything. So yes, he's better. It's nice that he doesn't take as much damage. He's a fun legend, but he's not S tier, and I don't think he's even A tier. That's why I've got him in B tier. Argue in the comments. Next in B tier is Lifeline. Now, Lifeline saw some changes halfway through last season. That being, they changed around how her ultimate was going to work. It's going to give you a gold knock, an Evo cash, a gold bag, and some other smart loot along with shield batteries. You can choose that or the self revive. Both are good options. Really depends on where you're at within the match. If you've already gotten purple and you're close to red, maybe getting the Evo cash isn't worth it and the self res is better. Nonetheless, Lifeline is a very strong legend, especially because her level 2 upgrade allows for her to always have her tactical whenever she wants. This is really strong, and there's probably a case to put her in A tier, but I've got her in B, and that's because really her revive is still not her best part, which is kind of ironic. She's still a really strong support legend. I think we'll see a lot of her this season, but I'm going B tier for now. Next is Mirage, and while Mirage is one of the best 1v1 legends because of the decoys and how he can spam his tactical and his ultimate very often, he's still a little limited. They nerfed his res a season or two ago, and it's not the same. It's not as good as it was. You can't control the decoys and make them look like they're reviving anymore, which is just an unnecessary nerf on Mirage because he's never been been OP or anything, so I don't know why they did that. I think he's a good legend, but he's not great, and that's why I'm going B tier for now. Moving down the list, I've got Rampart in B tier, another good but not great legend. Sheila is strong, the walls can be strong, but getting her in these moments where she's always ready to go feels a little awkward. Like, there are times where a fight feels too fast for Rampart's abilities, and it feels like she's rather limited. And without her tactical and her ultimate, I mean, her passive isn't all that great because LMGs aren't meta or anything, unless you get the care package devotion, which is going to be like 1 out of 30 games or something. But still, she's a good legend, and I don't want to take anything away from that, but she's just not going to be in the meta, and that's just facts. Next up is Seer. I put Seer in A tier last year. A lot of players disagreed. Seer did get some slight buffs halfway through the season. I'm going B tier for now. He's still really, really strong. Like, the Seer tactical and the Seer ultimate are both still very strong abilities. They've improved his passive as well, and a lot of players are kind of just not super aware of it, or they just don't enjoy playing him. I'm not sure which is the one. Maybe it's both. You could see Seer more and more throughout the season if more players kind of pick up on how good he can still be, but I'm going B tier for now. Next on the list is Newcastle. Now, we did see some buffs to Newcastle. His tactical can be thrown out 2.5 times faster, which feels amazing, and honestly, it's a great change. And then they also changed around his ultimate so that it can zap projectiles while the ultimate is energized, but you're still able to finagle throwables, you know, around the sides of it or over the top. So it's a buff to the ultimate, which prevents Newcastle from getting nade spammed, especially if he's using the ult to get a reset. He probably could go A tier because he does have the best res, I think, in the game right now, on top of all of his other abilities. His hitbox is really the killer here. A big legend, it's going to attract a lot of bullets. Yes, while he'll take slightly less damage, he's still much, much easier to hit than, say, a legend like Lifeline. There's no doubt in my mind, though, that Newcastle will be emerging into the meta somewhat. I don't know to what degree, but his pick rate will rise. But he's consistently been in the bottom 5 of pick rates basically since he came out, so this will be interesting to see. Now we're getting into some of the skirmisher legends that I have in B tier. Pathfinder is first. I typically always put Pathfinder in A tier, but man, is his hitbox just too much. I have succumbed to putting him into B tier. He's got some decent upgrades, but not great. I think a lot of players thought the tactical refresh on a knock was actually going to be better than it was, but I see a lot more people going with Zipline Zen so that they get that damage reduction while riding on the zipline for them and their whole team. He's great at rotations. He's a good legend to frag out with, a good legend to play in the solos mode with as well, but man, that hitbox, I just can't put him any higher than B tier. I've also got Wraith in B tier, which is a downgrade from last season. I had her in A tier. I consistently put Wraith in A tier, but I think with just some of the other legends and how I'm kind of viewing this season, Wraith is still strong and she can move her teammates and she can get out of dicey situations, but I just don't know if A tier is really where she belongs. B tier just feels more in line with where I think she is in the meta right now. We'll still see a lot of her, but when Alter came into play, it just feels like some of her abilities have much more outplay than Wraiths do. So that's a huge reason why I'm kind of downgrading her this season. And then lastly, to finish off B tier, I've got Octane. Don't get me wrong, Octane did receive some meaningful changes to his upgrades, and both of which are good. You can choose to either take less damage with your stim or get the change in directions on the jump pad. I think depending on what input you play on, that may be a tougher decision, but you can also stack on level 3 upgrades by choosing the stim again, so taking 10 less damage for using Octane stim, which is huge. But I think players will probably choose taking 5 less damage and then probably choosing the Mad Hops, which gives Octane a second jump pad. Octane is a super fun legend to play. He's better in pubs than he is in ranked. That's just because the pad isn't as good at rotating anymore. And I know there are some movement gods that make Octane look S tier, but I just think for the broad majority of the player base, B tier is a perfect spot for Octane, and that's a good thing. All right, now we're on to A tier. These are some of the better legends to be using in Season 21. First is the new legend, Alter. And Alter has proven to be a very dynamic legend so far. Her tactical has a ton of different levels of outplay. It's still early on, and I think a lot of players are still figuring out how it works and the nuances behind it, but so far it's really, really strong. With their ultimate, the Void Nexus, there are times when I feel like it's not that impactful, but right now, down players can still take this ultimate, and I guess we're not really sure if it's a bug or if it's meant to be. If it's a bug and it gets fixed rather soon, then that's a huge hit to her ultimate, because I don't think it's it's that strong. However, it's still a decent ability, but when down players can take it and potentially get resets after a fight is not going their way, that makes it really, really strong. Her passive also seems to be pretty strong. I didn't really know how it was going to turn out, but especially for the solos mode, you can grab a ton of loot, especially if you're not near that death box. And for controller players who can't move and loot, I think this is a really strong passive. So I've got her in A tier for now. Some people might think S tier, but I'm going with A. Second in A is Bangalore, and Bangalore is still in the meta these days, which is crazy because it feels like she's been in the meta for a very long time now, and she's been nerfed. But her kit's rather straightforward. She didn't receive any changes, and using the smoke often is still a strong tactical, and having that rolling thunder, especially when you can decrease the cooldown on her level 2 upgrade. This can prove to be a very strong piece of utility in combat, or if things aren't going your way and you need to retreat and create some separation. She's a very good legend, and I'm going A tier for now. Third is Conduit. Once again, another legend that has received some nerfs, not particularly this season, besides the change to Revenant's ultimate, but that's really not a huge deal for her. They changed around her level 2 upgrade so that she can now choose to stack 3 shield batteries per inventory slot if she wants to. This does not stack with gold backpack though. This gives it more of a competitive upgrade when choosing that or increasing her ultimate by 10%. Nonetheless, she's still a really strong support legend. The way she can impact combat is definitely the best part about her kit, and I still think we're going to see a lot of conduits in season 21. So if you're looking for the best support pick and you're playing with teammates, she's really strong. But also next in A tier, another strong support legend is Loba. If you're solo queuing ranked, Loba's probably your best friend. She can get in and out of situations. She can obviously get loot for her teammates. She's the ultimate reset legend. She's rather annoying because of this, because a lot of Lobas just queue away and don't really participate in a lot of fights. However, it's still an asset of hers, and for that reason, I got to keep her in A tier. For me, she's a little boring to play, but I know that I'm ranking them off their viability and not necessarily the fun factor here. But with all of that said, she's still a strong legend in season 21. Second to last is Maggie. Mad Maggie is a very, very strong legend right now. Her upgrades are awesome. She can choose to have that fireball or the big drill, which I think is honestly better than the 2 drills that are weaker, because the big drill most people just aren't ready for, and they aren't expecting that amount of fire when you're using it against them. Late game scenarios, the big drill is insane. She obviously has one of the best passives in the game. To get that brief wall hack off any damage can prove to be so valuable because it not only impacts like gunshots, but it's also super helpful with her tactical and her ultimate. She also has a rather short cooldown on her ultimate as well, so this makes using it often, despite it being frustrating at times, still a very strong legend. And lastly is Caustic. Now Caustic did receive some nerfs, nothing too big. The gas damage and slow now stops immediately after Caustic's squad is eliminated. This is not a big deal, and this was a bug that they said to have fixed many seasons ago, so I don't know how this is really back in the game or how it was back in the game. However, the bigger change is the gas damage now ramps up from 4 damage per tick all the way up to 10. Previous it was 5 and it went uncapped, and the damage on knocked players is down to a flat 4. It previously was 5. So this isn't a huge change. It does impact the changes that he received last season, where they altered the slowing effects and that sort of thing, but I still think he's a really strong pick. Get Caustic to late game and you probably have a free win. He's also really strong at holding buildings, obviously, and although a lot of alters will try to get into that building, Caustic has the only ability in the controller class that it's really a different type of area denial tool. Alter will still be affected if Caustic is smart, sets off the traps, or Alter comes through the building where Caustic is holding down. Those traps will still be set off most likely. When compared to Catalyst or Watson, the amount of area that they're denying probably isn't as much as the Caustic gas. Now, I don't think Caustic is as good on Broken Moon as he is on World's Edge, so factor that in with some of the maps and how they're going to rotate this season, but overall still an A tier pick. All right, now we're finally on to S tier, the best legends this season. To be honest, I don't have a ton of legends in here because I just don't think that there are a lot of legends that are extremely overpowered right now. But starting it off, I have Revenant. Now, Revenant did receive a slight nerf. Conduit can no longer regenerate his shields while Revenant is in ult, which was something that a lot of high level players were abusing last season. But even with that nerf, and even with the nerfs that he received in previous seasons, he's still a really strong legend. He's got the Shadow Pounce to get him in and out of situations, and his ultimate is like a free 1v1 tool. It's very strong, and it will still regenerate even when he gets a knock. There might be a case to put him in A tier, but I still see a lot of players using him, so I'm going to leave him in S for now. Second is Bloodhound, and Bloodhound also did receive some nerfs this season. They kind of nerfed their ultimate pretty heavily, I guess, but it hasn't moved the mark in my experience so far. Basically, they changed around the fact that when Bloodhound would get a knock in their ultimate, it would add additional time onto the ult, but now that's part of their level 3 upgrade, and they also increased their ultimate to 4 minutes when it previously was 3 minutes. So these are some pretty big changes to their ultimate, but the scan still works the same, and it's still a really strong tactical. Lastly, in S tier, I have Horizon. A lot of players may disagree with this high placement, but Horizon is really strong, and with all the changes to Broken Moon, with all of the different levels of verticality, Horizon feels like a must pick on that map. Not to mention, the first split's going to be King's Canyon and World's Edge along with Broken Moon, and she plays really well on those maps too. So I just think she's still a really strong legend. Having her gravity lift to get in and out of situations is still OP because there's really nothing else in the game like it. So these are my best and worst legends this season. Let me know what you think down in the comments. And while you're waiting for the weapons tier list, please be sure to check out this video next. Thanks for watching. Peace.